Welcome to another episode of Tidal Flooding Talk, brought to you by the New Jersey Coastal Coalition. I'm meteorologist Joe Martucci. She's Palma Shiles. Dan Skeldon is currently on a fire call. You know, amongst one of the many things Dan Skeldon does, he is also a volunteer firefighter. And I think, as our guest so eloquently put it, he is a superhero. Would you agree with that, Palma?
I would certainly agree with that too, because he has a full-time job, he's a dad, a husband, so to be a firefighter too, that's a lot for one person. That's superhero
It is a lot
status
for
right
one
there.
person. I hope he sleeps every once in a while. We do talk about that. We hope Dan is well rested when he's listening to this podcast. All right, so we are in the middle of May here. You know, the big story weather-wise has been drought, but for this, we're going to talk actually about the opposite, which is flooding, which is what we do on Tidal Flooding Talk. We have Courtney Wald-Wittkop. She is the manager of the Blue Acres program with the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. We're going to talk about the Blue Acres program, what it is, what it isn't, what it means for New Jersey, and all that good stuff. So, Courtney, welcome to the show. We appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. So, first question for you. You and I, we both are Rutgers people. You got your master's at Rutgers. I got my bachelor's at Rutgers, but you went to UC Boulder for your undergrad. So, are you from New Jersey? Are you from Colorado? What's the story here?
No, I'm born and raised in New Jersey, but I do love the mountains of Colorado. And I actually went to Boulder primarily because I was really interested in studying under Dennis Milletti, who's sort of like the godfather, if you will, of hazards. It was just geography, being outdoors, hiking, skiing, all that kind of stuff drew me away from New Jersey, but the ocean drew me back.
All right. Awesome. As it does for many people, for sure.
Yes.
So, let's start off with this. Blue Acres, if you could describe it in like one or two sentences, what is it for New Jersey?
I think the simplest way to describe it is we're the state-led voluntary buyout program. So our goal is really to help people relocate out of flood-prone areas, but they have to be willing sellers. And we work with individuals and communities to kind of make that possible.
Got it.
Now, what is the first step to joining the Blue Acres program? And why would someone want to do it?
Sure. So it kind of depends. We end up kind of responding both reactively after a storm where we get a lot of people who are interested in a voluntary buyout, but we also work proactively with communities who are doing sort of climate resilience or flood mitigation planning and kind of recognize that buyouts could be a useful tool. But ultimately, it always has to start with a willing seller, and they submit an expression of interest. We actually, a couple years ago, put it on our website so you can go online, apply. It sends you a copy or a PDF of what you submitted and an auto acknowledgement. And it's really just a way for us to get a lot of preliminary information about the property itself, the owner, the kind of experience the property's had with regard to flooding. And then we do all these other sort of like analytics and mapping on the back end to sort of evaluate and rank it and review it for funding consideration and prioritization. But it begins with that willing seller expression of interest, right? Homeowners have to say, you know what, I'm willing to explore this. And for some people, it's very easy after a flood event. They'll say things to us like, I'm done, I can't do this anymore. In other instances, it's people who go, it breaks my heart to do this, but I think I need to explore it. And either approach is fine by us. Again, we're a permanent program. We're here all the time. We have permanent staff within DEP. Our goal is to kind of help them through the process, try and understand the full scope of their needs and make them the best offer we can. But we also recognize that sometimes people will get into the process and change their minds, and that's okay too.
Got it. When did the Blue Acres program start in New Jersey?
So it's actually really interesting. I think Blue Acres goes back to like the 90s, which, truth be told, I wasn't around back then.
I didn't think so.
Yeah. But it kind of was born, I think, out of this desire to sort of help people relocate. And I think there was some flooding in certain areas of the state, the Passaic River Basin and the Raritan River Basin. But if you want to go really far back, Blue Acres is actually referenced in like the 1981 Shore Protection Plan. And it's kind of this reference to helping people relocate out of coastal hazard areas. And there was even a reference to sort of buying out properties on some of the barrier islands to kind of get people out. So Blue Acres as a concept has been around for a long time, but I think as a name is probably something that goes back to the 90s. So it's got about a 30-year history.
Wow. Okay.
And how do you determine what to offer people, like what the value of their home to be part of this program?
So this is one of the most important questions homeowners have. They're like, what are you going to base my buyout on, right? And a lot of times what we always just want to reassure them is we're going to do an appraisal. It's going to be performed by a licensed New Jersey appraiser. We're going to give you a copy of that appraisal. You can look at it. You can review it. You can determine if there are errors. You can ask us questions about it. And if we don't know the answer, we will go back to the appraiser and get those answers. But we're very transparent sort of about that being the basis for the offer. A couple years ago, we also started doing some additional evaluation of homeowner need. And we've created supplemental assistance or sort of incentives that are also available to help homeowners with relocation. It's something that we're mandated to do when it comes to tenant properties. So we do buyout owner occupied as well as rentals. Usually 1 to 4 units. So we don't really buy anything bigger than that. But when we're talking about homeowners, they may actually need more than just what the appraised value of the home is in order to transition. Sometimes finding a comparable replacement home outside of a flood hazard area is going to cost a little more. And so we have to help them with that transitional cost. And so we've developed a process to really kind of look at what are they going to need. And it's a very personalized process. We ask them information about sort of what they owe on their current mortgage and, whether or not they used beneficial mortgage products. And we do a calculation every year of what per square foot value replacement housing is for all the counties in that we're doing buyout work in, so that we can sort of say, well, this is what something's going to cost you now, right? And we also factor in things like what is the current prevailing mortgage rate, right? Because if you have a 3% mortgage, but you're going to a 6%, like how do we help you with some of that transition? And I don't want to make it sound like we can, just throw money at people, but the goal is really to kind of help empower that relocation. And we do kind of make one caveat. If we're going to give you those relocation funds, we really want to make sure you're moving outside of a flood hazard area. So you do have to give us an address that we can verify and make sure you're not buying, in another place where you'll end up kind of right back where you started.
Yeah, it's interesting you said that. We've had 2 people on Tidal Flooding Talk. One of them was Dr. Evis Garcia in Houston, or excuse me, at Texas A&M, my apologies. And she said down in her way, one of the problems for people is that if they get a house that's bought, if they buy out their property or whatever, they may not be able to move anywhere because their property's already devalued because of the flooding, but they get whatever the market rate is, but then they can't go anywhere. So is that a new thing New Jersey developed? I actually wasn't aware of this. So
we started after Ida because we've done a ton of buyout work. We've got over 1,200 properties that we've acquired, created, over 450 acres of flood storage and open space. But what we realized, I think, during Sandy was we knew how to do all the real estate stuff. We kind of figured all of that out, but there was still this delta of need that we weren't quite getting. And I think there's been so much more information, both in the academic realm and just from other programs all over the country, right, that are doing this kind of work. And we needed to kind of start to chip away at those equity concerns. And I think this was one way that we brought to the table an option, right, to kind of try and figure out how do you quantify that transitional need. There's a lot of other ways to do it, but this made sense to us in New Jersey because we do want people to stay here. We want them to be able to stay in the counties that they live in or the communities. There's some great research out of Rice University that says people only go like 7 or 10 miles away from where they were living. So how do we help people stay there, right? Maybe it's not in the exact neighborhood because there's, additional properties there that are flooding, but maybe you can be a couple miles away and still keep your kid in the same school district or still have all the same networks, friends, the commute to work is the same, those types of things. And so really just trying to kind of help people be able to imagine themselves moving, but also keeping communities vital and sustainable.
I have to say, we did a Tidal Flooding Talk with the author of that study too.
Yeah, impressive folks.
Yeah, it was a really interesting piece. And I do want to get into that a little bit with you. We're going to take our first break. We'll come back to that on the other side here on Tidal Flooding Talk. Base flood elevation is the level floodwaters are expected to reach in a major storm. Building below it puts your home at risk. Building just 1 foot above it can significantly lower flood insurance costs and reduce flood damage. And don't forget to elevate mechanical equipment like air conditioners and generators. Small changes can make a big difference. This message is brought to you by the New Jersey Coastal Coalition.
Hello and welcome back. You are watching Tidal Flooding Talk. We are brought to you by the New Jersey Coastal Coalition, and we would like to remind our viewers that floods happen all over. Think you're not at risk? Floods happen in every U.S. state, and not just in high-risk zones. Even a few inches of water can cause thousands of dollars in damage. Check your flood risk at FEMA.gov and stay informed.
Awesome. We're continuing our conversation with Courtney here, talking about the Blue Acres program. I did want to touch on what we had with Jim Elliott's episode on Tidal Flooding, talking about where people move. So when we look at that in New Jersey, are we seeing these people moving actually out of the flood zone? Or are they saying, well, hey, I've got my house bought out in Fortescue in Cumberland County, and now I'm going to go to Bivalve, which is also on the Bay Shore?
Yeah, I think you're seeing a little bit of both. I think you're seeing people stay within the same county, but I also think you're seeing some people move for different reasons, right? Like we've heard stories, I'm moving because I need to take care of a family member, right? A parent or something like that. So I lived in Middlesex, but I'm moving to Ocean or whatever. I think sometimes you're also seeing people make decisions about where they work and where they live, and sort of, it's an opportunity to like get a little closer to work or things like that. But sometimes they're really just staying in the same town. They're just moving outside of those flood zones, which I think is really what, in an ideal world, you're incentivizing people to do, right? Stay part of your community, but just kind of move out of those areas that are at higher risk.
Got it. Okay.
That kind of leads me to my question. Does the community have to approve this or be part of it, or can the homeowner go directly to you and the municipality doesn't really have a say in the matter?
So ideally, we want strong partners in local governments. This type of work is best when it has a local nexus and lots of strong partnerships, not even just the municipal governments, but also community groups and organizations that can kind of help people understand why this is needed, what the land is going to do afterwards, because I think that's an important factor, right? We buy these out, but we remove the homes, we create permanent open space, and then we want that open space to serve as a buffer or to serve as flood storage. And sometimes restoration projects are needed. And I think if you can get the rest of the community or the rest of the neighborhood excited about the potential of those projects, it goes a long way in helping kind of alleviate the loss of those neighbors, those loss of those people. And also, the rateable conversation is a real valid one, right? A lot of local governments who are very dependent on residential taxes are worried that if you have a bunch of buyouts, how are they going to make their municipal budgets work? And we recognize that. I think what we'd love to see is a strong local partner who will not just help keep people in their communities. We've seen suggestions where they'll partner with like a local realtor or residential broker who will create lists of properties that are for sale in the town. And when people are participating in the buyout, they make that kind of available, right? In an ideal world, those are the types of local partnerships that you have because they want to keep those residents in their community. We do have some instances, though, where towns are like, we just don't have the capacity to really support that. And that's okay. We can ask for local management through a county or through a nonprofit organization, but we really would love to see the land locally managed and as a local benefit to the communities and the neighborhoods that we're working in. So it doesn't mean that a homeowner can apply without municipal support, but we're certainly going to try and reach out to those local governments and get them engaged and get them involved. It's very rare that you come across a community that's like, we don't want to help these people, right? And especially when people are making very impassioned pleas about the level of damage and, the financial, emotional implications of all of this sort of stuff. But I think, it's working together jointly and really kind of building those strategic partnerships that we can do the most effective work.
So let's talk big picture here. How many homes has the Blue Acres program bought out, and what was the value of those homes in total? Are you able to give us those numbers?
So I can tell you, we've acquired over 1,200. We kind of use those round numbers because literally we've had 2 closings this week. And so we're constantly chasing numbers. So we try to sort of just use sort of rounder whole numbers. But I can tell you that when we talk about value, it's changed over the 30-year time period. If you look back at some of our data, and you look back at some of the stuff that was bought in the 90s, those properties were bought for, 100 to 200,000. We're now looking at properties well over 400. But we have bought much more expensive homes than, quite honestly, most people would have thought, because it is based on the appraised value. We are not negotiating that with people. I had an assistant commissioner that I worked with many years ago who his famous line was, "We're not buying your house at a discount. We're not. It's completely transparent. This is what the appraisal says. And then what else do we need to add to it?" Right? Kind of a thing. So it's really about people understanding what their homes are worth. We also have an appeal process so people can come back and say to us, "Hey, I did my own appraisal. Here's the numbers. I think it's worth more." And then we'll go actually take their appraisal and ours and get a third. So we really do want them to feel like we're triangulating the value. We're responding to them and giving them the best offer we can. Again, we're not doing this this isn't like, oh, I really want to, get their house on the cheap. Like, I don't get a bonus for that or anything. Really what we're trying to do is help people and kind of make this possible. We also realize, and many of your listeners who maybe even have been impacted by flooding or coastal storms themselves, most people will tell you that the cost to do repairs is never fully covered, right? You're usually spending some of your own savings, or you're dipping into, something in order to make those flood repairs. And I think we all, as the general public, have to kind of acknowledge that, right? If people have repeatedly had to do some of this sort of stuff, it does get really hard to save, and it does get really hard to kind of have that nest egg that you want. And so I think making sure that people feel like whoever's running these types of programs and giving them these offers is really aware of the full scope of how impactful flooding can be, and severe damage and repetitive damage can be on people's emotions, finances, and sort of just general livelihoods.
Sure.
Now,
All
if someone comes to you,
go ahead, Paul.
It's okay. I'll save it for after break.
All right, we'll save it for after the break. We're going to take our last break. We'll come back with Courtney here on Tidal Flooding Talk.
Thanks to the New Jersey Coastal Coalition, your flood insurance bills are lower and your streets safer from the reality of flooding. Since beginning in 2013, we build more resilient shoreline communities. Our member towns develop and share in best practices that anticipate future concerns and create flooding solutions. From our town-specific free web app for flooding information to our weekly Tidal Flooding Talk show, we focus on flooding 24/7. Visit www.njcoastalcoalition.com for more.
Hey, we are back with Tidal Flooding Talk. Remember, new episodes every Tuesday, wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. We average about 3,800 views, listeners per episode. So thank you for that. And we're going to try to keep it going up as we go into the year, especially we have great guests like Courtney here from the NJDEP. So Palma, you had a question before the break. I'll pass it along to you.
Yes. So for homeowners coming to you, but they're unsure of what they want to do, how do you guide them through the decision-making process? Are there certain questions that you ask them, or topics they should have in mind when making this big decision?
So that's a great question, Palma, because one of the things about Blue Acres, and I think one of the things that makes us a national model, is that every homeowner is assigned a case manager, a Blue Acres case manager. And this is sort of a dedicated person who walks that homeowner through the process from the very beginning. They develop a deep rapport. They also are really there to kind of help advocate and also suss out what additional needs do these homeowners have. Sometimes it can be things like housing counseling could be helpful. We have had some folks that needed credit counseling, things like that. But in some cases, it's also just people who are sort of struggling with like, okay, this happened. Maybe it's a one-off. Maybe I've only lived here for a little while. Is this really as bad as, people are saying? And a lot of times our goal isn't to give them a hard sell about their risk, but it is to sort of show them a bunch of different resources. And so we will often encourage a case manager to sit with a homeowner and say, here, look at these different independent sets of information from NOAA, from Rutgers, from all these other places, to kind of layer and look at where your property falls in relation to some of what's going on. And then you decide, right? And it's not for us to tell you what your risk is, because everybody does perceive that kind of differently. I've got a homeowner that we're working with. He has a couch on pulleys. He has no problem pulling it up before he leaves for work because his house floods twice a day, right?
Can you tell us where that person lives?
I'm not sure I should tell you that because he hasn't closed yet. But I mean, fundamentally, different people will live with different levels of that kind of stuff, right? And then there are other people who would never want to deal with that headache. And the truth is, we're not here to sell them on it. We're giving them an option. They should explore it and then decide for themselves what is right. Your home is your biggest asset. Nobody should take it away from you. You should decide what works for you. One of the things that we've done, and we've come back. We've come back to communities more than once. And I have a feeling that over the lifetime of the program, we will continue to do that. If people, need more time, I use the phrase to marinate on the decision. Like, we may have to do a reappraisal at some point, and you might want that anyway because time has passed and the market looks better or different. But at the same time, it really should be a voluntary decision. And voluntary isn't just from the day you apply. It's the day you get your offer. It's the day you accept your offer. And then it's voluntary even up to the day we close title and you hand over the keys and you get your money. And if you want to change your mind before that, that's okay.
Do you feel like it's tough for Blue Acres from the perspective of you want to help as many people as possible, but at the same time, the people that you're probably targeting don't have the same income as the higher people who might live in Avalon or Stone Harbor, and they flood too. So what goes into like your decision, and maybe not you specifically, but the decision-making process into saying, well, we want to help as many people as possible, but we don't want to make it look like we're just buying out people with lower income and moving them somewhere. How do you guys reconcile that?
Yeah, it's a tough one because, a lot of times we focus a lot on owner-occupied primary residence, right? And so a lot of our coastal areas have a lot more sort of either seasonal or people who own multiple homes and things like that. And so, focusing on the people who like, this is your primary residence, right? Like, this is where if a storm happens, you don't have anywhere else to go. You're not evacuating to, another place. So I think focusing on primary residence has been part of really making sure that people feel safe at home. It's the backdrop of your regular everyday life. I think the other part of it is, your income and your social circumstances really shouldn't dictate safety. Most of us are feeling very strongly these days about the fact that you should go home and be safe. And that's where, when a storm does happen, you should feel the most comfortable sort of hunkering down and waiting for it to pass. But I do think there are a lot of people who are constantly checking flood gauges and who are monitoring the weather, no offense, Joe, but like ad nauseum, and it's stressful, and they will tell us like they don't want to live like that anymore. And I think those are the people that we really want to help because it's an emotional experience to live like that. It's stressful. The cortisol in your body can't be good for you long term.
No, you're right. You're right.
So looking ahead, what do you think the future of flood resiliency looks like in New Jersey?
That's a good one. And there's so many things. I know I don't have like forever to answer it, but I think flood resilience is really about people understanding the risk and taking the time to kind of have some of the difficult conversations, both at their own dining room table, as well as, kind of across those important board tables in municipal and county governments, and even probably, the state house itself, where I think we have to start talking about what makes sense long term. And I think we need localized planning. And I can't plug enough, sort of the climate change related hazard vulnerability assessment process, where you really kind of go through the what ifs and the what can be dones, because I think what everybody in New Jersey wants when they think about their home and how they invest in their home is they want to make sound decisions. But I think they also want to know what's happening around them, right? Elevation is an awesome solution, but not if your town isn't also got a plan to elevate roadways and all those other utilities and infrastructure that goes along with it. Because the last thing you want to do is put all your spare money into doing something and then realize you're still stranded and surrounded by water for days, or that, you have to wait it out. And we've seen homes catch on fire. We've seen medical emergencies and people are like, I can't go through that again. So I think it's really just about kind of giving people information to make informed choices, and for communities and individuals to really have some of those tough conversations. And I think buyouts will be a tool. We shouldn't be the only tool. We really need to be part of comprehensive solutions that are made. And it's going to be tricky. It's going to be tough. But I know that, New Jerseyans are very resilient. We're very savvy. And I think when push comes to shove, we do what's right because we care about each other and we care about the state we live in and want to see it thrive.
Well, that's a beautiful way to end it. I mean, we should just end the episode here. We don't even have to do the one thing we can't stop talking about. Courtney, really, in all seriousness, thanks for taking the time out to be with us. I know it's an evening. I know it's during the middle of the week, so we do appreciate that. We will end, though, with the one thing we can't stop talking about, tidal flooding or otherwise. Palma, am I going first? You going first on this one?
I can go because I have an easy one. So this is
Okay.
airing on May 12th, which is
Yes.
my wedding anniversary. So
Aha.
happy anniversary, Ken.
There you go.
Hopefully we're out
Happy
to dinner
anniversary.
somewhere right now.
That's true. You have to listen to this in the car on the way to dinner. Where do you think you're going to dinner? What do you think future you is going to dinner at?
So before, when we lived in Atlantic City, our like go-to was like docks or somewhere in one of the
Right.
casinos. Now that we live, offshore, we don't really have a go-to place yet. So we'll probably make the trek back to Atlantic City somewhere for
Okay.
dinner.
That's fair. I mean, Atlantic City is the best food in the region.
It's pretty good.
All right. So this is airing on May 12th. My birthday's May 13th, so happy early birthday to myself. But I can't stop thinking about why I'm under the weather today. Is it the pollen? Is it I'm sick? I do have a triple digit fever right now as I'm talking to you.
Oh my God.
So
I don't think
don't-
that's allergies. So
probably not. But it's funny. It's not funny, but it's funny because I said on Sunday, wouldn't it be funny if I got mono just randomly? I don't know. I'm not saying it's mono. But stay tuned. We might hear, depending on how I feel in the next 24 hours after this. Hopefully I'm just steady where I'm at now because I can live like this, but we'll see. Anyway, not to be the bearer of bad news, Courtney, I'm sure you have something wonderful to talk about that's on your mind.
Gosh, I don't know. I think we're all coming off the heels of, sort of climate week and or Earth week, right? And so, that is still very much a buzz at DEP and everywhere. And so, kind of as we come into spring and really thinking about how we can, kind of be better stewards of the environment, I think that's on the forefront of everyone's mind. I'm looking forward to getting into the garden. That's definitely what I'm thinking about.
Awesome. Great stuff. And happy Mother's Day to everybody here. Of course, this is going to be after Mother's Day, but we wish happy Mother's Day to you both and all of our mothers out here listening to Tidal Flooding Talk. This was a production of the New Jersey Coastal Coalition. For Courtney, Palma, I'm Joe. We have new episodes every Tuesday night, wherever you find your podcasts or on YouTube. You can check out more from the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection by going to, is it njdp.gov, Courtney? I'm actually forgetting.
Mm-hmm.
It is njdp.gov, and we'll talk with you next time. Take care, everybody.